Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a look at a set of sources that, honestly, detail a scenario that is just about every parent's single worst fear.
Mm-hmm. It's intense.
We're talking about the mass kidnapping of 10 elementary school students and their bus driver. They were taken right after leaving their after-school care at a place called Bright Beginnings.
And our mission for this deep dive is to unpack this incredibly detailed and yet ultimately very flawed plan.
We're going to look at the impossible choices that the parent of two of the victims had to make.
Yeah, and the resourcefulness, the extraordinary resourcefulness shown by the children who were trapped inside.
It's not just a crime story, is it? It's more like a terrifying logistical puzzle.
It really is. The sources we have give us this almost clinical view of the crime itself. The mechanics, the failures of the plan.
And the agonizing moral compromises.
Exactly. Made by the parent who is just desperate to pay the ransom.
Yeah.
And then you have this sheer, gritty survival instinct from the people trapped, 12 feet underground.
And the timeline, that's what really gets you. It's so tight.
Incredibly tight. You're looking at less than 24 hours between the actual abduction and the deadline for the ransom drop.
And the parent, Sheena Patterson, she's the city council treasurer, she's given this one single guiding principle.
Absolute silence.
Absolute silence and complete compliance with this anonymous and very technically challenging demand.
So we're going to explore this whole ordeal through, I think, three really critical lenses.
Right.
First, we'll start at the beginning. We'll look at the plot itself, the two kidnappers, Ted and Andy, and see how their history, how it shaped the physical reality of this
bunker they built.
And we shift to Sheena's crisis. The calculus of deciding to commit fraud to save your children.
And that brilliant, it's a high risk, but brilliant move involving a single broken piece of technology.
And finally, we're going to go underground. We're going to witness that extraordinary internal fight for survival.
Led by the driver, Jessa, and a 9-year-old girl, Sage, whose small, raw hands, they became their greatest tool.
It's a study in how desperation, trauma, and just sheer determination all collide. So let's get into it. Let's unpack this entire intricate saga.
Okay, so we have to start with the people who set this whole nightmare into motion. Ted and Andy.
The sources describe them as functional deadbeats.
Which is such a perfect term for them.
It is.
They could hold down jobs, short-term jobs, but ultimately they were driven by resentment and this kind of low-stakes opportunism.
But they were a completely mismatched pair.
That detail is so crucial to why the plot eventually just falls apart.
Absolutely. On one hand, you have Andy. He's the volatile one, the action man. He's impulsive, aggressive, swears constantly. The children later on, they just remember him as greasy hair.
That's all they knew him as.
Yeah. And he really represented the brute force of the plan, and I would say the accelerating moral decay of it, too.
And then on the other side, you have Ted. The detail man. The kids called him Jeepers.
Jeepers? Why was that?
Well, the sources suggest it was maybe his nervous demeanor, or just the way his eyes looked under that pantyhose mask. But he was the architect of this whole thing.
And the architecture, the very idea for it, it goes back to this moment of professional humiliation.
It does. Ted, or, Mr. Edwards as he was known, he was a former bus driver from Bright Beginnings.
But only for a very, very short time.
A very short time.
Yeah.
He got fired after what the sources call, pretty euphemistically, an apple disaster.
Apple disaster.
Yeah, he basically lost his temper and just started cursing loudly in front of a whole
busload of elementary school kids.
Not a good look for a school bus driver.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And that dismissal, that kind of public slight, it festered with him.
And what's so wild is how he leveraged that fleeting access he had.
Right. He was an employee for maybe a week and a half? But in that time, he saw the system's vulnerabilities.
So he used the login credentials of a former acquaintance, a woman named Kirsten. And they were super easy to guess.
Of course they were. And with that, he could digitally window shop the student directory.
So this wasn't some sophisticated, organized crime ring.
No, not at all. This was a crime built on, basically, weak passwords and a whole lot of bitter revenge.
And that access let him find a very specific, high-value target. So why? Why did they land on a Halverson family?
The plan was clinched, really, the second they saw the mother's job title. Sheena Halverson, city council treasurer.
Got
Ted realized that targeting a family with access to, liquid municipal funds, or, more importantly, with the knowledge of how to get those funds quickly and quietly.
That was way more lucrative.
Far more lucrative and just logistically easier than hitting some random wealthy family and just hoping they had millions in cash lying around.
They weren't just looking for money.
No, they were looking for financial leverage that could bypass all the normal banking limitations.
That makes so much sense. Sheena was basically a walking key to the city's immediate financial accounts.
Exactly.
So let's talk about the execution, which, I mean, it happened with alarming speed. They used 2 vehicles.
Right, Andy drove a van for a company called the Speedy Shuttle. He was leveraging his actual legitimate side gig.
So the van looked totally innocuous, professional.
And Ted followed behind in a separate, much less conspicuous gray van.
And their strategy for getting the bus 315, off the road.
It was deceptively simple.
And it was highly dependent on compliance.
And this gives us our first real glimpse into Jess's mindset, the driver, which we are definitely going to
Unpack in a bit.
Ted placed his professional-looking detour sign on the rural highway.
And Jess, as the driver, she just saw the official sign and followed it.
Followed it right onto this narrow, rarely used dirt track that wound through a cherry orchard. It was the perfect spot.
Because once you're on that track, there's no turning back. You're committed.
And once the bus was trapped, the enforcement was just immediate and chilling. Our sources detailed the kidnappers' masks.
Just pantyhose.
Just pantyhose pulled over their faces.
Yeah.
And Ted reportedly even checked his to make sure it was the opaque kind.
Whoa. That's that pathetic attention to detail again.
It is.
And the first most important low-tech step they took was confiscating all the electronics.
Immediately. Every single student's cell phone, the driver's phone, everything was
Swept up.
And they just tossed them later.
Yeah, they tossed the whole cache into a weedy ditch miles away from the abduction site.
Yeah.
Why was that move so critical for their timeline?
Well, it bought them that essential window
Of time, the time they needed to transport the victims and seal them in the bunker.
Right. Modern kidnappings, they almost always fail because of electronic tracking.
So by getting rid of all the devices instantly, they made sure the police wouldn't get a location ping until, the ransom drop was already well underway.
It turns a high-tech tracking problem into a needle in a haystack search. And that gave them at least a 12-hour head start.
And they used that advantage to get the victims to a place called the Pit.
This was a closed-off section of the North Side Quarry, a place already used for, dumping waste and old equipment.
The perfect kind of isolation.
The best. The road was barely used after the cherry harvest, so nobody's going to see them.
And this wasn't some last-minute rushed hiding spot, was it?
Not at all. This bunker was a year in the making. Ted and Andy had worked at the quarry together, and they'd spent their off hours building this thing.
What was it exactly?
It was a standard shipping container. They had buried it on its side, a full 4 feet beneath the earth.
I mean, just think about the sheer labor involved in that. The coordination it would take to dig that hole, position that massive steel box, and then cover it all up again.
It speaks volumes about the depth of Ted's resentment, right? He didn't just snap one day. He built a prison.
So what was the access mechanism like? Because that detail is so vital to what happens later on.
The entrance was just this narrow, square shaft. It was shored up with some plywood reinforcement, and it led straight down to the roll-up door of the container.
So the whole structural integrity was just based on that plywood holding back tons of tacked earth.
Exactly. And the covering mechanism, the lid, it was designed to be absolutely physically impossible to move from the inside.
Right. The lid itself was a massive, heavy, yellow metal panel from an excavator. Just cold, thick steel.
And that wasn't even enough for them.
No. They then topped it with a nearly 100-pound excavator battery.
Just to make sure that the combined weight was impossible for anyone trapped inside to shift, even if they could somehow climb that 12-foot shaft.
Ted called it his masterpiece.
He did. He was supremely confident in the design. He calculated that even 10 kids and an adult working together couldn't apply enough upward leverage to dislodge that weight.
It was designed for total isolation, psychological and physical.
You're not just trapped, you are buried and you are sealed.
And yet, despite all this sinister, high-level planning, Andy, the impulsive one, he was complaining about having to bring supplies.
Yeah, but Ted, he ultimately made sure they had the most basic provisions. Some gallons of water, plastic cups, and peanut butter sandwiches.
And air hoses.
And air hoses, right, running up through the shaft.
That little detail is such a critical point for understanding their motivation.
It is. Andy wanted this to be quick, dirty, disposable.
But Ted's inclusion of supplies, making sure they had enough for...
What, a couple days max?
It just reinforces his initial intent. For him, this was a transaction. He needed the victims alive and functional to guarantee he got the ransom.
So if he hadn't planned for their temporary survival, the whole ransom plan would have been pointless.
It shows that Ted, the planner, was at least for a moment holding Andy, the violent actor, in check.
Okay, so now we have to shift our focus completely. We go from the bunker to the world above ground and to the pressure cooker that Sheena Halvorson was just plunged into.
And the shock. It begins when she arrives late to bright beginnings. She was stuck in traffic.
And she pulls into the parking lot, and it's just a maelstrom of blue and red lights, cops and frantic parents everywhere.
Her 2 daughters, Sage and Bonnie, along with 8 other children, and the bus. They're just gone.
That initial shock, it gives way so quickly to this very personal and invasive kind of terror.
Right, because the ransom note, it doesn't come digitally. It arrives via
An anonymous pizza delivery from a local joint, Speedwagons.
Which was a calculated move.
Oh, absolutely. It was a way to communicate. We know your routines. We are close. We are watching you.
And the instructions in the note were blunt, terrifying, and they were designed to stop her from taking any legal action.
do not contact the police or FBI. You are being watched.
And then came the demands, which really show that the kidnappers, they understood financial thresholds.
Precisely. They demanded 2 types of currency. First, $50,000 in cold, hard cash.
The quick liquidity they needed to just get away.
Exactly. And second, and this was more strategic, a $2 million Bitcoin transfer.
And they saved the Bitcoin part for the very end of the plan.
Right, because they knew that any transaction involving that much crypto would immediately trigger automated government and banking alerts.
So they essentially built a tripwire into their own plan.
But it was only meant to be sprung when the children were, in theory, already safe and sound.
And the timeline they gave her was just, it felt physically impossible.
It was. Sheena was tasked with collecting that 50 grand in cash from 5 separate banks in 5 different counties.
Starting at 9 a.m. the next morning.
And she had to finish the
The cash drop at a place called Little Eddie Campground by 7 p.m. that same day.
Just think about the logistics of that.
It's insane. Driving across 5 counties in a major metro area during business hours, navigating bank lines, and still making it to a remote drop site by 7.
It was intentionally tight.
Completely. It was designed to keep Sheena in a constant state of high-stress compliance without a single minute to spare to even think about calling the cops or, trying to develop some kind of counter-strategy.
The sources say they believed that pace would prevent any deviation from their plan.
Yeah.
But her decision to reject police protocol, it wasn't just born out of panic.
No, it was fueled by this haunting piece of her personal history, the ghost of the Mindy Falcrest case.
Which had been drilled into her head.
Head by her father, a retired police officer who is now struggling with Alzheimer's.
And this is such a crucial motivational layer. The Mindy Falcrest case was this old, tragic incident
Where a woman died after being poisoned by her husband.
And her father, even as his memory was fading, he obsessed over it.
He obsessed over how the police who responded had dismissed a crucial detail from a child witness, and it cost the victim her life.
His mantra, which he repeated to her constantly, was what?
Trust your gut, Sheen. Screw the rest.
And that sentiment, that law enforcement protocols can sometimes prioritize procedure over essential intuition, that gave Sheena the moral license she needed.
the license to violate the #1 rule of any kidnapping response.
Which is to involve the FBI immediately.
She decided her gut, fueled by her unique financial expertise, was her best weapon.
And that expertise was tested right away by the logistical nightmare of the cash.
Because banks have to report any cash withdrawal over $10,000 to the federal government.
So she tried to pull 10 grand from 5 different accounts.
5 alarm bells would go off instantly. It would freeze her funds and bring down the exact law enforcement presence she was so desperately trying to avoid.
So she makes this incredible moral pivot. She leverages her position as city council treasurer to essentially commit municipal fraud to save her daughters.
Yeah, let's really unpack the mechanics of these false vendor bids. How does she turn city finances into liquid cash so quickly and quietly?
This is where her specialized knowledge becomes her superpower.
It really does. As a treasurer, she knows the flow of municipal payments inside and out. She can just fabricate invoices.
False vendor bids for services that look completely legitimate, but
Were never actually performed.
yeah.
Like submitting a $9,758 invoice for, emergency repairs or play equipment maintenance at Longfellow Elementary.
By keeping the amounts just under that critical $10,000 reporting threshold, she could access city funds through cashier's checks or direct withdrawals
without triggering any federal red flags.
She's basically paying herself using fake invoices,
Yeah.
all under the cover of legitimate city business.
It's highly criminal.
Oh, incredibly so.
But it was also incredibly fast and effective for her immediate goal. She was playing a numbers game against the clock, constantly juggling accounts to hit that $50,000 mark.
But even with her expertise and her willingness to just break the law, she still ran into a problem.
Right. By the time she finished her 5 bank runs, she was short.
How short?
Precisely $5,757 short.
The tension must have been immense. I mean, she's now committed a serious crime and she still failed to meet the ransom demand.
Right.
But before she can even tackle that shortfall, she has to handle the problem of her father.
He needed total focus, but his condition meant he couldn't be left alone. So she took him to Cherished Hearts, a memory care facility.
Under a false pretense, too. She told him it was just a visit.
It was a necessary cruelty, you know. It caused him a lot of agitation and the sense of betrayal, which only added to her
Immense emotional burden.
But it was a calculated move. She needed him to be secure, and the facility was. And she had no idea at the time. It was barely a mile from the quarry.
Which brings us to what becomes her true game changer, and is rooted in that painful decision to place her father there.
At the final cash drop at Bull Lake Trailhead, she knows she has to account for the missing cash.
So she wraps a note detailing the shortfall around a substitute item,
Her father's broken Rolex knockoff watch.
which, critically, had a functioning low-power GPS tracker built into it.
She claimed the watch was an asset with $12,000, twice the shortfall, as a kind of leverage.
But the real value was the hidden technology. This device, which was originally meant to track her wandering father, now offered her the only possible way of tracking the kidnappers.
It's so ironic. The high-tech part of their plan, the $2 million in Bitcoin, was meant to trigger the authorities.
But the low-tech, broken knockoff watch was her key to gathering intelligence.
What was
The risk level on using that watch.
Immense. The watch battery life was critical. It was down to 7%, that it was dropping rapidly to 4%.
Because it was an old device.
Yeah.
Sheena knew that if she continuously checked the location ping, it would drain the battery instantly.
So she was rationing her information gathering.
Completely. She'd open the app for just seconds at a time, grab a single screenshot, and then immediately close it to conserve every single precious milliwatt of power. It's the ultimate example of resource scarcity applied to data.
So she's balancing the threat of immediate murder if the kidnappers feel shortchanged.
Against the slim, rapidly fading hope of actually locating the bunker.
She goes through with the Bitcoin transfer, the final alarm-raising step, and then in this desperate final act, she checks the app one last time.
And that's the moment. The screen freezes. The little blue dot, the one indicating the watch's location, it just dies.
The battery is completely gone.
But the freeze happens at a very specific intersection. An unnamed dirt road intersecting with a place called Sugarloaf Lane.
She now has a fixed terminal location.
And because of her earlier decision to drop
Her father at Cherished Hearts, she realizes that location is barely a mile away. It gives her a fixed point in space and time to target, and it justifies every single risk
she took, including the embezzlement.
So while Sheena is racing the clock and breaking federal financial laws up there, the drama unfolding 12 feet beneath the earth is, well, it's purely psychological and physical.
And our focus turns to Jessa Landon, the bus driver, who is immediately established as this very complex figure with a dark past.
The sources reveal that she was working under her maiden name, Jessa Palmer.
Right. Because her true identity, Jessa Landon, carried a heavy secret.
She served 3 years in jail for voluntary manslaughter.
She killed her abusive husband, Matt, during a violent confrontation. And just by concealing this on her job application, she was already violating her parole.
And that history, it fundamentally shaped her initial reaction to the kidnapping.
It did. She had already experienced the crushing weight of institutional authority and punishment. And that led her to believe that silent, total
Compliance was the only path to survival.
Her motivation is so heartbreaking.
It is. She lost custody of her daughter, Soph, after the conviction. Her biggest fear wasn't dying.
It was going back to prison and losing sleep forever.
That paralyzing fear is what drove her compliance. She was fiercely telling the 10 children, especially the observant 9-year-old Sage, to be quiet and sit down.
She believed the kidnappers would honor their word if she she just followed the rules perfectly.
She even lied. She told her frantic children they were being watched from above just to stop them from trying any desperate escape attempt.
But the dynamic, it flips so dramatically when Sage, who is always the sharp observer, overhears this crucial fragment of a conversation.
Right. Sage hears Andy Greasy Hair complaining to Ted about the risks. He's whining, we could just leave him down there, push some more dirt and junk over him.
And that small statement is the catalyst. It's Jess's awakening.
She realizes that compliance is a path to certain suffocation and burial.
That moment, it just snaps her back to her deepest, most raw survival instinct, the one honed by her previous trauma.
She instantly recalls the emotional abuse, the threats, and the ultimate necessity of defending herself the night she used that fireplace poker against her husband.
She recognizes the shift. It's no longer a transactional threat. It's a murderous one.
It's this profound moment of realization for her. Jessa knows she has to break the ingrained rules of compliance, not just for herself, but for the 10 children whose lives now depend entirely on her defiance.
Her personal history, which at first inhibited her, now becomes the engine for resistance.
And the physical instrument of that resistance is Sage.
Yeah. The sources credit her with using her deep reading of Harriet the Spy as, like, a practical guide.
She wasn't just observing the kidnappers, she was cataloging details, even when Jessa was telling her not to.
A methodical witness. She noted Ted's nervous energy, Andy's physical appearance, all while Jessa was telling them to stare at the floor.
And she quickly became the engineer of the escape plan. She realized that they had to get leverage against the roof.
So they start this monumental physical task of stacking the provisions.
They took the heavy, uncomfortable mattresses and started stacking them in that cramped 12-foot-high space.
And you have to remember, this is all happening in absolute darkness, sealed 4 feet under the earth.
The sensory experience must have been just terrifying. The sources note the mattresses groaned with every effort, echoing loudly in the steel container.
Increasing their fear of being heard by the men above.
And once they got the height they needed, Sage zeroed in on the weak point, that plywood-reinforced shaft above the roll-up door.
And her tool of choice was just astonishingly
A
primitive.
simple belt buckle.
She uses it to scrape away at the plywood, trying to wear it down, fiber by fiber, to carve a hole big enough for a small child to get through.
It's an agonizing task. The sources are very clear that her hands quickly became raw and bleeding.
And this is where the physical labor, combined with the psychological strain, it really threatens to break her.
She starts to falter.
Oh,
She's
yeah.
paralyzed by the fear and the intense pain.
But this is where Jessa pivots. She goes from fearful follower to a true leader. She knows that brute compliance is over, and now they need mental fortitude.
Right, so she guides the other 9 children to create this supportive circle, focusing everything they have on motivating Sage.
And she uses mental conditioning, the kind of psychological survival technique she must have learned or seen during her time in prison.
They use affirmations, focusing on positive visualization. They started chanting phrases, but they specifically used the word when.
When we escape, we will get ice cream.
When we escape, we will tell our parents.
They never, ever allowed the word if into their vocabulary.
That constant reinforcement is what pushed Sage past her pain threshold.
And she succeeds. She finally scrapes the hole wide enough to pull her body through. It's described as feeling like a tight, dark laundry chute.
But her success comes with a devastating, immediate consequence for everyone she left behind.
The integrity of that makeshift plywood shaft was completely dependent on the earth supporting it evenly.
So when Sage pulled her body through the opening,
The shifting weight and the massive pressure from hundreds of pounds
Of dirt and that heavy excavator battery above, it just caused the surrounding plywood to buckle.
The entrance instantly filled with wet, packed dirt.
And Sage wriggled
out just as she hears footsteps approaching. Ted's footsteps. Her freedom has just sealed the fate of her friends and Jessa.
so the second Sage breaches the surface, the whole carefully constructed plan of the kidnappers just collapses.
Completely. Ted Hubert, he arrives at the pit, already vibrating with panic. And he has multiple simultaneous triggers for this breakdown.
Right. First, he's dealing with Andy's escalating drunkenness and his casual, terrifying talk about murder.
Ted always saw this as a financial transaction, never a homicide.
Second, he discovers a tiny but critical piece of evidence.
The small hole that Sage had meticulously scratched in the internal window pane of the getaway van.
Which confirmed his worst fear. The children had seen their faces.
Identification was now guaranteed. And third, while checking his encrypted phone, he gets the notification.
The $2 million Bitcoin transfer went through.
And that transaction guaranteed that law enforcement was now not just looking for a missing bus, they were hunting criminals with full federal resources.
The panic is immediate, and it just leads to an eruption when Andy Greasy Hair returns from the ransom drop and discovers the collapsed shaft and the gaping hole where Sage escaped.
Andy flies into a completely violent, uncontrollable rage. He starts screaming at Ted, grabs his gun, and just immediately starts sprinting in the direction he assumes the girl ran.
And this forces Ted into a moment of extreme, desperate moral clarity.
He realized in that instant that Andy was going to commit murder, and he couldn't be a part of it. He had planned a complex crime, but not a vicious capital offense.
So instead of following Andy, he shot this defiant, intentional distraction,
Fuck you, hurled right at Andy.
which stops Andy dead in his tracks. He swivels around, gun pointed, and for a second, he prioritizes his conflict with Ted over chasing the child.
And that distraction bought Sage the few precious seconds of distance she needed
To get away from the immediate grounds of the quarry.
So Ted makes his final, calculated, self-serving choice.
He realizes the plot is ruined, Andy is a murderous liability, and the police
are on their way.
He grabs the ransom money, the original 50 grand in cash, and the Bitcoin access keys, and he just flees the quarry.
Effectively choosing to potentially take the fall alone for the kidnapping, but refusing to commit or even witness a murder. He's the functional deadbeat choosing to functionally survive.
Meanwhile, Sage is running on pure raw adrenaline, navigating this unfamiliar darkness.
And she's following this distant cluster of lights she later describes as ground stars.
She runs until she hits a tall, white wooden fence. She scrambles over it and lands on the perfectly manicured grounds of Cherished Hearts, the memory care facility.
And she just crashes through the exterior door, screaming for help. This is that truly cinematic moment where all of Sheena's risks converge.
Her grandfather, wearing green flannel pajamas and often lost in the fog of his Alzheimer's, he hears the piercing sound of his granddaughter's voice.
And despite his condition, he just snaps into this singular protective clarity.
He charges the door, yelling, "That's my granddaughter!" He helps the staff and the facility security deter Andy, who is just seconds behind her.
Andy's momentarily confused by the sudden appearance of lights and people. The grandfather's protective instinct, the very thing Sheena was trying to safeguard by moving him there, becomes the final barrier.
And Sheena, who is already speeding towards Sugarloaf Lane based on that final frozen GPS ping, she gets a frantic call from the facility.
She arrives almost instantly, and she finds Sage safe, and her father miraculously lucid and protective.
The police, who are already on high alert from her earlier call and the Bitcoin trigger, they just swarm the quarry within minutes.
But the clock isn't finished ticking for those still trapped.
No. The police use the GPS data and Sage's directions to find the pit, but the entrance is buried under all that packed earth.
So Sheena, desperate and just unwilling to wait, spots a large yellow excavator
Nearby, and she jumps into the cab.
And she just starts digging frantically. I mean, she's demonstrating the same refusal to comply with authority or even safety protocol that allowed her to meet the ransom
in the first place.
The police eventually take over the rescue, and they pull the remaining 9 children and Jessa from the collapsed entrance.
And the sources confirm that Jessa took the physical brunt of the collapse. The weight of the dirt and the massive battery, it fractured her L1 vertebra.
That injury caused a temporary paralysis known as spinal shock.
And it's important to clarify, right, that spinal shock is a temporary loss of reflexes and motor function below the injury. It's caused by the trauma. It doesn't necessarily mean permanent paralysis.
But the pain and the immediate fear of being permanently injured and losing your daughter forever must have been just agonizing.
But they are safe. 2 days later, Sage and Bonnie are recovering in the hospital.
And the sources give us this glimpse of the aftermath of Sheena's impossible choices.
Right. Sheena rewards
Sage's incredible maturity and resourcefulness with a new privilege. She tells her she's now responsible enough to watch Bonnie after school,
which eliminates the need for bright beginnings altogether.
It's this kind of psychological closure on the trauma of the bus ride.
And Jessa's story receives this unexpected and really powerful twist of redemption.
Sheena writes her a deeply felt note. She apologizes for any initial brief judgment and thanks her for protecting the children, telling her she was a good mom to all of them.
And that public recognition of Jessa's heroism, her defiance that saved them, it attracts a lot of attention.
Jessa, still recovering from her spinal injury, receives multiple offers of legal help from high-profile attorneys.
all of them aiming to overturn her voluntary manslaughter conviction.
Yeah, based on the circumstances of her abusive past and her subsequent heroic actions, her act of defiance didn't just save the children, it unexpectedly paved this radical path toward redemption for herself.
This deep dive gives us such a rare look at the calculus of a crisis. Survival hinged entirely on when and how to reject blind compliance.
Jess's initial compliance, which was born of trauma and her fear of authority, it was nearly fatal.
And Sheena's decision to trust her gut over the FBI and to use a dying GPS device, that was calculated defiance, and it was backed by the criminal act of embezzlement.
The narrative really emphasizes that compliance. It buys you time. But resourcefulness, Sage using a belt buckle, Sheena using a knockoff watch, that's what secures freedom.
Every major decision, from Ted's initial choice to recruit the impulsive Andy to Sheena's strategic use of that $10,000 banking threshold.
It all created a direct, traceable chain of events leading to either success or spectacular failure.
And I think the most profound takeaway is this concept of unexpected redemption. This trauma, ironically, acted as a catalyst for forgiveness and second chances.
You have Sheena recognizing Jess's inherent goodness and Jessa receiving the legal lifeline she never ever thought was possible.
We've seen that desperation, when you pair it with resourcefulness, can lead not just to immediate survival, but to a radical reordering of one's life.
So we leave you with this thought. What deeply ingrained societal rules, what profound personal red lines would you break if the safety of those you love depended on it?